Welcome back to the channel. In this video we are going to take an image of a remnant of a stellar explosion, and that is the Jellyfish Nebula, or IC443. My name is Morten and you are watching Frost Astrophotography. Back in 2022 I took an image of the Jellyfish Nebula as one of the first objects that I took in this hobby with the current equipment. At that time I managed to get 6 hours worth of data, and now it is time to revisit this target. And this time I have 25 hours worth of data and new processing techniques. Let's see what we can get out of this data, so join me in PixInsight. Here we are in PixInsight, and welcome to the processing of a new object. This time it's the Jellyfish Nebula, or IC443, among other designations this object might have. I did an image of this back in 2022, and that time I had about 6 hours worth of data. I've used that data, or at least some of it, and I've also added data. So for this image I have a total of 300 light frames, and they are 5 minutes each, as usual, and it is 100 light frames of each filter, HA03 and S2. The data was captured during 11 different sessions, spanning from the 14th of December back in 2022 until the 1st of February 2025. This brings the total integration time to 25 hours in comparison to 6 hours for the last image. I've also added a lot of new processing techniques that we will go into. First off, I will start by pointing out the very obvious in this picture, or in these 3 light frames, and that is the massive halo problems that I have. I know I've said this before, my filters aren't the best. Maybe I've also tried to capture data this time during not optimum conditions. For example, I think I did capture a lot of HA and S2 when the moon was a little bit too bright, and I can't really fix that now other than just going back and capture more data. And that means that I will have to try and work around all of these halo problems here. You can also see that the halos are reflecting, since this star is so bright here, the halos are also reflecting to the left and to the right here. And in some instances, you can also see halos in other places. Like here you can see 3 halos here. You can also see a halo that has been replicated down here, and a very faint halo here. So you basically have 6 halos, and one of the main problems here isn't the things to the left and right here outside the main object. It is the halo that's covering a portion of the object, and also this halo that is covering a large chunk of the actual Jellyfish Nebula here. So if I'm using the normal halo reduction technique, and by the way, if you want to know more in detail about how to process out big halos, I have a separate video on this step by step that I will put in the video description. So the problem is that if you reduce the big halo here, you will also reduce a large piece of the actual nebulosity here. And that will affect the final image. Well, I have to be honest and say, when you have halos like this covering a piece of the object, it will be impaired in the final image. So it will be interesting to see here how I will work through or around this. But we're starting with 3 master stacked and drizzled 2x light frames, 100 100 frames each, 5 minutes, and a total of 25 hours. I'm starting the linear phase as I normally do, with a small dynamic crop. And I've opted to use the script automated dynamic background extraction, and that is available from SETI Astro. You could just Google that. He has plugins for PixInsight, and he also provides a lot of his tools as standalone tools that you can use outside of PixInsight. I used this script with the default settings here and simply executed it on each of my light frames. And it tended to work fairly good, I would say. So the automated dynamic background extraction, then I ran through blur exterminator. As you can see here, there's a big difference in before and after when we are talking about star size and also sharpening of the non-stellar objects. As you can see here, this is the same zoom factor, and the stars have been significantly reduced here in the comparison. So blur exterminator, of course, and then noise exterminator. And then I ran through star exterminator, and I do this in the linear phase, and then I stretch the stars and the starless frames separately. So here we have the starless, and then we have the stars. We're gonna come back to the stars, but if I do a screen stretch here of the starless version, and keep in mind now, I haven't really done anything to the halos yet because I don't want to reduce the brightness too much on this area on the nebulosity. I normally do some halo reduction right after blur exterminator, before noise exterminator. In this instance, I didn't do that at all. I'm going to process the halos out in the nonlinear phase. And I will see what the result will be of that. But you can see the major problems here, especially these three halos and this very, very big halo here. You can't see so much of the halos here, here, and here in this image, just a little bit. This won't affect the final image. Keep in mind, this isn't my final stretched version. It's a screen stretch only. As always, I do this for all three filters, even though I showed you one filter right now. So keep that in mind going forward. Moving along, we're not in the nonlinear phase yet because we haven't stretched the image. And I normally use statistical stretch in conjunction with the IHDR script because I find it very convenient and it saves me a little bit of time. I did the same here. I also tried stretching it with histogram. I tried generalized hyperbolic stretched, and the result was about the same for me. I couldn't really do anything about the improving the halos before I actually addressed them. So this is the stretched image just using the script from SETI Astro first, statistical stretch, and I've run through them. I lower this setting to a 0.15 and this setting to a 0.05. If you want to know the exact steps to take in SHO processing in general, I will also include a link to my step-by-step video for that, since this video is just a short recap of the processing of this particular object and not every step in detail taken. When that is finished, I use the IHDR script. And for that, I use the low HDR setting, a stretch intensity of about 10, and a mask strength of about 1.3. If you have very bright areas, you might need to experiment with this, but keep this mask strength up, I would say, to protect those bright areas from being washed out. So the image on the left here is the stretched, unmodified or unprocessed H alpha light frame, and on the right here I have done extensive processing. As you can see, there's been a lot of manipulating of the areas here around. It's not perfect here. I have to use clone stamp and I have to carefully try to neutralize the halo here. And of course, everything behind the halo here has been more or less sacrificed, I would say, at least in the H-alpha filter. Fortunately, there's not a lot of data here. There is some data that I have been forced to sacrifice, but I was able to keep most of this intact. The edges here are not great, of course. Clone stamp is a crude tool. If you use masking and try to lower the intensity of the mid-levels here, you will get a sharp line here as well. That is not great. But this is the final image that I got from manipulating the halos here, and I also adjusted the black point just a little bit here to further make it more seamless, I would say. Just to demonstrate very quickly here without going into details on how to attack the halos here, I use the game script, and if you have multiple halos like you have here, you can see that you have a halo that starts here, and then you have another halo going here, and that's just because the different sessions are very far apart, and the object has actually rotated a little bit, or the Earth has rotated, I should say, and I haven't rotated my camera at all, so that's why we have halos in different positions here. You want to use a binary mask. You want to add your eclipse or multi-point. I will add an eclipse right now, and I will try to get that to fit this particular halo here. And as you can see now, we have another halo that's barely visible there. So I will add another one that I will make about the same size here. It's not super important, but I want to keep it as good as possible. And then I will add that one to cover the other halo that's barely visible. If I want to try to adjust multiples at a single time, I could also add more here. Let's try to add one more to address the halo over here maybe. And then I click OK. Then I will make a mask here with the halos in question. I have to convolute the mask a little bit to get rid of the sharp edges. I have a pre-made setting in my convolution tool here. Then I will add this mask to my light frame. And then I will disable show mask so that I can see what I'm working with here. Open up histogram transformation tool. Make sure I have the correct image selected and open up a preview. If I want to now, I can zoom in on a specific area just to manipulate that one, or I can keep it as is. Now I have 3 different masks here, so I'm manipulating all of these 3 halos at once, but this one is much more brighter and requires more work. So I'm taking the middle lever here and I'm adjusting. You can see now that we are working the halos here. If I do this, we'll get black spots. If I do this, I will increase the halos. So I will try to find a sweet spot so that there's as little difference as possible between surrounding background and the actual halo. The halo itself is normally a little bit brighter ring on the outside, so it's normally quite impossible to get a perfect result here. You always, or pretty much always, need to go through with a clone stamp tool there, but when you are satisfied with your adjustments, you will click apply there, and then you will have your first manipulation done. So this is an iteration game, I would say. You remove your mask, you restart the game again, you'll make a new mask, and you will iterate through that until you end up with a result that you are happy with, like the one I showed you just now. So this is before and this is after I have manipulated the halos visible in this image here. When you are done with the stretching and halo processing of your SHO simply join them together in an SHO blend using SHO in RGB. I use pixel math because I think that is the most easiest way to get it done. And then you will end up with an image looking like this, an SHO starless image. And this might not be to everyone's liking. There's a lot of green and some magenta in here, but we can already now see the nice blue color of the oxygen 3, even though this region here is very affected, as you can see. If you compare this to the rest of the image, you can see that we have the halo here, or remnants of the halo, and that is unavoidable. And I can't really do much about that now because the signal has been more or less compromised in this area. So we'll see how that will affect the end image. I started off as I always do. I run through SCNR, removing the green, inverting the image and removing the magenta, and end up with an image looking like this. You can still see that we have this blurry patch here, and the processing is not great on the edges, but that is what I have to work with. The rest of the image and the data here looks great, I would say, considering that I have a fairly cheap Skywatcher 80 EDE dual refractor with some 7nm SHO filters. So fairly happy with that. Doing an initial color correction here. I boosted the blue, and I also increased the saturation a little bit of the blue there using a color mask for cyan. I left the other colors alone with the color masks, and then I proceeded to open up the selective color correction script here and just slightly boosted the red-yellow. I might boost that more later, but for now I will keep it as it is. I ran through some sharpening. We'll see if you can see that. We'll select an area here and we will compare it to the right. And you can see that, well, you have a slight sharpening. I tend to be very restrictive when it comes to sharpening here because you can't really improve on data that's not perfect to start with. Continued on with some noise reduction, and here you can actually see a bit of a difference here. I don't know if that comes through in the compression here of YouTube, but comparing this little dark patch here to the one on the left here, you can see that we have achieved some noise removal of the non-stellar objects. I use TGV denoise, and I also use that with a mask, not to completely disrupt the image here. I created a synthetic luminance from the H-alpha. I processed that a little bit in terms of contrast and sharpness, and then I applied it to really get some more vibrance in the details here. You can compare the two here. You can see the very intricate formations here in the clouds, and they look so much better when you add a bit of sharpening and contrast of that luminance layer. I ran through the dark structure enhance using half my regular strength here. You have a lot of dark structures, but you don't want to overdo it. And I also did a final color correction here, boosting the red ever so slightly, boosting the saturation for shadow areas, and also the blue just a little bit more to reveal this area. Unfortunately, like I've said a couple of times now, this little area up here is very much affected by the halo. So this was the final image. Comparing this one to the first, this is the initial integration of SHO, and this is the processed SHO. I'm fairly happy with that. You can see a lot of details on the right of the object here. I normally use generalized hyperbolic stretch for my stars, but this time I opted to stretch it manually using histogram transformation. And the trick is here then, when you stretch with histogram transformation in iterations, make sure that you repeat the exact same stretch for each of the filter, so you have the same level of stretching. And I did this because I wanted the bigger star to be a little bit bigger in this image. So this is stretched a bit more than I usually do, just to keep it a little bit bigger. So I then combined the SHO stars into SHO stars, and then I ran through my astrometry image solver and the process spectrophotometric color calibration to really calibrate the colors of the stars here. That led me to the final integration, and for this I have the starless version and the stars version here side by side, and I integrated those using pixel math. Then I slightly adjusted the levels, or a curve, an S-curve, to reduce the brightness a little bit of the image, and then also adding a little bit of contrast. So here we have the final result. It is 300 light frames, 5 minutes each, 25 hours SHO with SRGB stars of the Jellyfish Nebula. With all of its splendor, I had to sacrifice a lot of the data up here. But all in all, I would say it is a fairly good result for this image. If you don't think about the loss of signal in this upper area, I am fairly happy with it. And I want to show you a comparison between this image and the old version of my Jellyfish Nebula. And that is 6 hours worth of data. In this instant, I also had to crop more. It is not dithered at all, and it is with H-alpha stars. So you have an SHO with H-alpha stars, and you can really see the difference here, I would say. If you compare 25 hours to 6 hours, and yeah, I used some other processing techniques. I stretched the images manually with histogram transformation. I really wanted a black background back in those days, and that's why you have it like this. And for this image, I tried to squeeze out every single last detail that was available, and that's why I ended up with this. I also use smaller stars here, of course. And yeah, we will see if I will revisit this object in the future. Maybe if I am able to get some other equipment to really make it a little bit easier to capture these kind of targets without washing out the object with the star that is close by. Enjoy this, and I will see you in a video in the near future. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you like it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're not already doing so. If you want to support the work with these videos, there is an option listed in the video description that you can use. And until the next video, I wish you have clear skies.